Hello, everybody. This is the second episode of CloudFerro podcast or videocast, or I do not really know how to call it, but this is where we are, and we are continuing. Today with me is Stanisław Krzyżanowski, Head of Strategy in CloudFerro, and I am Radek Zaleski, CMO at CloudFerro. And today we will be discussing the most, I believe, hottest topic of the recent weeks on Twitter, which is loosely connected to cloud, which is everything related to cloud code, or how to call it, this little crab machine that you can host it on your private mini Mac computer, or maybe on some VPS server, as some people are advising, or whatever. Hook it to your LLMs and do stuff. And why it is important for us to cover this topic, because again, it relates to all things in a cloud, AI, LLMs. I think very interesting topic for cloud company. Would you agree, Stanisław?
Yeah, I must say I'm terribly excited. I feel like we have reached a focal point that I've been waiting for the last, 5 years, when I was observing how the cloud and tech landscape changes over time. And finally, with the emergence of your or our good friend and assistant, the difference between what is cloud, what is public, what is private, what is on premise, what is in your pocket or under your desk changes, or even is non-existent, really. And nowadays, really, from what I see, from what I see in professional life, but also what I see in my private life, many people really think about where their stuff is. So where their agent will be running, what they will have access to.
Right. If you're following the whole debate, it started with the notion that you can use this framework, hook it to your cloud code, give it this thing access to your desktop machine, and run it. And this machine would, or this LLM robot would pretend that is you, that is a human actor. And some of the folks online, they said, well, maybe the more secure solution is not to give it to your personal computer, but maybe you should buy a dedicated Mac Mini. And that was the solution of choice. Or as the others said, maybe you should basically hook it up to the virtual private server somewhere and do not spend money on a computer, right? And then maybe you should basically hook it to a scalable cloud solution and add tons of agents. And then, how to say it, conquer the world, I guess, with us all capabilities. Now, the question is, what should I do if I'm a individual aficionado of those models? Should I go mini-Mac? Should I use cloud? What's your take on this?
Well, it depends on your needs for your personal use. I would not advise you to go in a very big scalable cloud, but I would advise you to be cautious about willy-nilly configuring any agent to access your personal data, your communicators, your media, because you can end up in a very funny place, but funny for others, not for you. Anyways, we all saw on Twitter this guy who had to physically disconnect his Mac Mini to stop CloudBot from deleting his entire inbox.
Yeah, that was something like that. At least that was what we were told. What was it true? I don't know, but yeah.
I have no idea, but I like to think it's true because we make full circle, I would say. So yeah, you can disconnect Mac Mini and you have full control over it, which is very, very nice. You cannot disconnect easily a VPS or a virtual machine, whatever you call it. But you cannot really extend Mac Mini. You can buy another one and buy another one, but it's not fast. It's scalability of 20th century. Not the there is a payoff to it. I would and I will personally consider what is my use case, what data I want it to work. Is it something for personal life where I would tend to be more cautious even than for professional applications, where I'm more willing to accept risk versus reward of going into cloud, into a very scalable model. It also depends how whether we're talking about development and testing environments or production environments that need to access your live data. So yeah, this is my question to you. What do you want to use it for?
So honestly speaking, I do not want to risk my data. This is why I asked you about this before the podcast, and it was the reason why we are even recording, because we had a loose chat around this, what is happening, and then it led us to this, maybe not that important, but in my view, very relevant and interesting question. What are the differences between right now, what is my, let's say, desktop computer, what is my extension of myself as a second desktop computer, then what is a so-called VPS or private cloud, and what is a public cloud? And you've said to me that this is the really important and interesting topic right now in the whole industry. What is what right now, and how to, describe the value chain for it. And I think that for the personal use, of course, this is not that relevant. At least every individual should make their own decisions. But for the businesses, I guess this is important right now, especially with this whole agentic software, right? How should I set up my team? Should I give my individual employees machines, or should I give them VPSs, or should I give them access to private clouds? I think this is not that clear right now, and those definitions change, right? Do I got this right, Stanisław?
Yeah. So number of topics you have touched on. So first of all, there is no single answer. Even professional life, let's call it, there will be many approaches depending on your particular use case, on your scale. There are factors to be considered. These are safety, so control over data, ability to audit what happens. This is safety. This is cost efficiency. So how much are you willing to spend? How much can you actually spend? Then you have speed and flexibility, and this is also very important. And it usually translates into money this way or another. How fast you can set up new environments? How fast you can scale up? How fast you can scale down? This would impact our decision-making process. I mentioned that there are a couple factors to be considered in making decision. But to make a decision, we would not have to know what we are choosing from. Yeah. So we mentioned that there is a personal computer or Mac Mini that you can physically disconnect. This is a very personal use. This is a very local, not very scalable. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the public clouds. What is a public cloud? It's a large-scale digital environment that offers and delivers computing resources and services on top of these resources that allow us to interact with data, to process data, to set up applications, to do lots of different, very complex actions. And then I mentioned it's a spectrum. I've said in the beginning of our talk that we are the focal point. What I meant is in between public clouds and personal computers under anyone's desk, there's a number of things. A private cloud means an environment which has a limited access. So who can access this environment is limited, usually by either the administrator or the owner of this environment. It can be in a commercial colocation. It can be a part of a public cloud that is digitally fenced off from other users. It can be an on-premise thing. And for a long time, especially on-premise and these physically separated private clouds were quite rudimentary. So usually VMware based, usually offering very simple services. You get a server, here you get some storage, and then you have to build your entire tech stack, application stack on top of it with your own hands. Now, it's not really sufficient, especially when it comes to prototyping, when it comes to this rapidly changing world of AI applications or AI generated applications.
And why it is not sufficient? How would you describe it? Why it is not enough right now?
Well, because let's say you're a user. What do you want to do when you're talking about setting up an agent? Are you interested in installing an operating system, configuring it, downloading Python packages and libraries, or do you want to download an app and just have it run within 30 seconds?
Yeah. So how I view it, I would love to have almost the same experience I have on my desktop computer, right? Like maybe not a full admin privileges. I'm not giving this to my LLMs on my local computer, but I would love to have access to the internet, to connect with other machines, to run software, run containerized software, all of this.
And that would be great. That would be great. And it sounds really, really, really simple when you make this comparison to a personal computer. But to offer this kind of access in a virtual environment of a cloud, that's actually a complex tech stack with multiple services.
Yeah.
For the last 5 years, and I've been personally observing that private cloud offering evolves. You get more services in private clouds. At first, you could expect, manage Kubernetes within a private cloud. Then something. Now you can expect that there will be a container registry, that there will be function as a service, stuff like that, built in within your private cloud. And the focal point I'm talking about is for the last year or 2 years, we have had these more advanced private clouds, but they are still a completely separate entity environment from a public cloud. Now with agents, with this, I'm a bit worried to call it that way, but with this revolution, it's not longer enough to have this one type of environment, as we said, because the needs are very, very different. Depends on what you do, and ultimately you want to be able to access virtually the limitless resources of a public cloud for your development and testing and R&D.
So what I am hearing often is that during this whole agentic revolution and LLM models being more and more proficient, is that companies and management teams are seeing the capabilities. They're seeing those capabilities deployed on local machines, on local employees or private computers. And then they are thinking, okay, how we could run it as an organization, maybe in a cloud environment, but then there is a question, okay, but should we run it in public cloud or even using public LLM models if we are siphoning the data inside those systems, right? So I guess the question is, can we kind of have a mixture? So can we have a flexibility of a cloud, but in a private environment? And can we hook it up to LLM models that we can control and we can understand where the data is flowing? And this is a place for those like private cloud you're mentioning, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm going to give you a very simple, to show you a very simple scenario. You have an agent which accesses two types of data. One type is open data. Something from the open data registry, and it can be accessed by everyone, but it needs a lot of it. It needs terabytes and terabytes of the data. The other type of data needs very small amount, but critical personal data that you and your company operates with. It makes sense for the critical data to be very secure and probably to actually be under your desk, quote unquote, within your data center, however you want to keep it secure. It doesn't make much sense for you to set up a multi-petabyte data repository for the open data registry. So what you need actually is an ability to seamlessly move or access resources in between on-premise solution and the public cloud. And then your agent, well, it deals with both types of data. So you do not want it to be in a public cloud, but it needs to be able to scale. So it requires multiple, to set it up, we've said that it requires a complex tech stack. So you need an environment for it to operate. And then one agent, that's purely theoretical. There will be more of them, or there is more of them. And you need to be able to set up new ones to kill the old ones. Can we still say kill the agent, or no?
I think it's fine. I think it's perfectly fine. That was my another question related to this, because one thing that we were discussing is that a lot of right now management teams are talking about scaling the companies using AI agents and having AI employees. And with let's say a human employee, it's pretty clear that if you hire an employee, you buy a computer like a laptop or a desktop Mac Mini, you give it an access to the cloud via subscription services like software as a service subscriptions. And that's it. The damage that such employee can do in terms of usage or a compute is, limited to abilities of that employee and the number of symbols it can put online, or lines of code you can write. But with AI employees, at least theoretically, you can hire like 10K of such employees next week. What you're missing is Mac Minis. It's not possible to procure 10K Mac Minis, but you could potentially do it with such private cloud systems, right? And the companies are thinking about this, how I hear it, how to manage this, how to, as you've mentioned, what happens if I kill an employee? Sorry, agent, my mistake. Kill employees, only agents. But those are the thoughts that companies are having right now, right?
So my not serious answer is, when two employees talk with each other during coffee break, there is a small chance that they will spend 500,000 euros. If you let two agents talk with each other during a coffee break, well, they can, if you let them. And the serious question, yes, the predictability and control that you have of the scale of the processes that happen in the private clouds play a big part here. Again, especially, and this is something that we do here at CloudFerro, especially the ability to connect private clouds with public environments gives you this scalability that gives you the ability to manage scenarios where you might accept a bit more risk to get some speed, or other way around, when risk is not acceptable, so but you still need to do it, so you need your on-premise environment.
So going back to this anecdote from the first minutes of the recording, we were discussing this Twitter post that someone wanted to kill off the Mac Mini, like hook it up from a grid or whatnot. Now, it might seem like such a desktop computer is a safe alternative to swarm of cloud computing, but is it more secure to a swarm of personal devices with people running their own agenting systems on personal devices? Or maybe it's a mirage, and maybe it is much secure to run a well-thought private cloud and allow such agents run in it?
I would wager that it's more secure to set up a private cloud than to have a myriad of personal devices and some processes running also on personal private devices of your employees. Private clouds come with guardrails, with certification, with entire cybersecurity teams that do the managed part, that do the oversight part, to an extent that is agreed and that is necessary and required by the customer. But it's certainly easier to keep the lid on the thing when it's one encapsulated environment rather than 10,000 ones.
So of course it was a question with a thesis. What I hear from my friends at different companies, I'm not saying at CloudFerro, is that as we have access to such systems and access to a lot of GPUs, but they would love to use different AI agentic systems, or they would love to use different external solutions to speed up their development work, but they cannot, because this is not a compliant thing, or the thing that is being allowed is not the thing they would like to use. So what they do is precisely what you've mentioned. They are using private machines to move the work data onto those machines and vice versa, which is clearly something that is very hard to manage, as if comparing to what you're proposing, having a swarm of well-managed machines, probably it would be much more secure. At least that's the thesis, which probably should be tested.
With our experience, I would say that is the promise that we and other cloud providers give to the customers. The delivery on the premise also depends on the user. It's not like private cloud lets you not care about security and not care about control, but it's hell of a lot easier to do it this way.
So taking into the account all of the things related to this agentic software development revolution, all of those agentic platforms. One thing is what I'm doing with my private data on my private computer, but the other thing is what organizations, highly regulated institutions are doing with their own stuff. And in the past, maybe it wasn't a huge issue, but right now, because of a political rift between Europe and US, and the need for a more strict data governance, it might be more and more of an issue. What's your take on this? How it impacts this whole personal device / private cloud / public cloud discussion? What will be impact on this?
Now it's time for a controversial take. The apex of public cloud is over. It doesn't mean that the public cloud will be no more, but the consideration will not be, should I be on premise, as in on my computer, or should I be in private cloud? The question will be exactly what you mentioned: how much control of my data I need to have. Can I allow this particular process or this particular data to be in a public environment? How risky is it for this application to run in a public cloud? So the consideration will be where I need to be, and I expect the market will change in this direction, that we'll not be talking about public versus private, but we'll be talking about virtual environments across a continuum to say. I don't really like this term, but it's somewhat fitting. It will be a continuum.
It's totally flipping, right? Because this is how we started this discussion, right? So in the past, let's say not that far away past, like my personal device hooked to the internet was not a cloud, was my personal device, right? But if people are buying one Mac Mini, which they're going to use only for their agentic systems, you could argue that this is highly limited private cloud solution, right? If people are buying 10 Mac Minis and they are connecting it, it's like very mini private cloud, right? Then we go to this, what you've mentioned, like well-managed private cloud with access to public data repositories, right? So this I would say, and continuum is reality, right? The question is where it's going.
Yeah, and we'll see more and more of an API unification.
Yep.
On the user level, the functional transition will be seamless, whether you're running on site or in public. It will be quite indistinguishable, but it will take into account the security considerations. This is what we will see, in my opinion, and this is why I state my claim that public clouds have reached their apex and are busted.
I will double that, but no one is asking me, so I will ask myself for my prediction. So I agree with you, but the reasons are not only regarding the security, but the reasons are also kind of related to what makes the LLMs so successful right now and so special, and how the whole internet is built. So till right now, basically, the more open you were, the bigger was the reward, right? The more data you put online, the bigger was the reward, because you could bring traffic, visibility. You wanted to open your APIs. You wanted the others to use your systems because it would build your fortress of mode of connections and the ecosystem. But if you have agentic actors, not people, strange things are happening. For example, here at CloudFerro, I bought ourselves a Canva.com system solution for a marketing solution with API access, right? Now, they closed it soon enough because companies are using agentic systems to create a lot of content using those APIs connections. So basically, they closed their, so to say, public cloud or public access, and they became more a closed solution, right? And I think this might happen just because of a cost sooner or later. If everything will be hosted and accessible and on public cloud, and you will be opening as much systems as possible for others and allowing your infrastructure be used by others as was in standard SaaS model, this might be a risk for your basically business model and cost-wise. Now, if your company relies on some kind of a proprietary data and insights, and you have limited trust towards other systems, let's say those fundamental models like OpenAI or others, you don't want to have them access to your proprietary data. Now, we see what is happening in the US. Ministry of Defense said that they're going to use those LLM models as a part of our accessory. I would argue that any kind of organization that has, proprietary data of highly significance, they should remove themselves from such public cloud systems. So I think two things will be here important, like cost and those, like political reasons, which are right now highly, highly of importance. And the other thing I hope, we'll see how it goes, but support your notion is that if the companies are smart enough, they will be hooking as much as data as possible that they own and putting in some systems or models or storages, private clouds, and train their own models to be more efficient. It is not that easy, but I think this will sooner or later happen for the majority of a big organization. I think this will be another huge trend that supports your vision.
And here you gave a perfect example where you need something more than Mac Mini. So fine-tuning or retraining a model, it's a complex task. And on one hand, it requires usually a significant amount of resources. And by resources, I simply mean you need lots of data and quite a bit of GPUs. You can buy them. They are crazy expensive. By crazy expensive, I mean, and a single GPU can cost up to $45,000. You buy them in batches of 4 or 8 or 16. But you can buy them, but there is a small chance that you will use them enough for it to make sense, because actually GPUs in the cloud are, yes, they are very expensive because the hardware is expensive, but it's not a bad deal to go after a GPU in the cloud. So on one hand, you have cost. On the other hand, fine-tuning or training a model is a complex task. You can build an application to do it from the ground up. It's possible, but it takes time and it takes expertise. And in cloud, nowadays, also in private clouds, you get products, you get tools to do it from push of a button. And this is a big advantage.
So we need to wrap it up soon enough. So one last question, and I will try to relate to my own personal perspective. So when I was starting my job in a software development community, it was clear that the majority of the system was on-prem, and there was this new cool thing called cloud, usually the American hyperscalers brands. And it was obvious, it was clear, it was the future, that there is no way that everyone is not going to move to those cloud systems. Why? More efficient, more secure. You don't waste time on your on-premise infrastructure. Does not make sense. This is not your business. It made sense, I guess, right? I was even, advising or seeing a lot of those transitions, and it made total sense. And right now, when I'm observing those things, I'm not so sure if I'm going back to on-prem, which is 10 Mac Minis under my desk. I don't think I'm going there, and I wouldn't recommend. I mean, public cloud is a clear solution for everyone, right? And I think there is a bit of a coming back to those early days when you think about the infrastructure. Where is it? Can you control it? Where the data is flowing? Do I get this right?
Oh yeah, I think so. We can see flow in the opposite direction. Companies and people coming back to not on-prem as it was defined, because what we've mentioned, because it's complex to run this stuff. But I think that we can see users flowing back to private, to hybrid, to anything within this continuum with their applications. Not with everything they do, but with the critical stuff, with the sensitive stuff. Yes, they will.
So let's see how it goes. Very interesting conversation. So thank you for a chat. My guest was Stanisław Krzyżanowski, Head of Strategy at CloudFerro. Maybe one final thought, Stanisław?
From a personal perspective, I believe that we are looking at really the most exciting time in cloud and tech. Something that we haven't seen for many, many years, although I'm not as ancient as Radek.
Ancient, that's we have to wrap it up. That was unnecessary. I'm going back to running my own cloud bots that are going to destroy your cloud bot infrastructure, Stanisław. That was clearly an attack on my experienced personality, not ancient. Thank you very much. My name is Radek Zaleski. I'm a CMO at CloudFerro, and see you soon. Bye. Thank you, Stanisław.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Radek.